Lesson 11, Part 1, Dealing with Extreme Weather, Hurricanes in the Caribbean. The geoterms for this lesson are El Niño, a warm ocean current that flows off the west coast of South America every few years. An El Niño event changes weather patterns around the world. It may also cause extreme weather in some regions. Extreme weather. Severe or unusual weather conditions such as hurricanes, tornadoes, and blizzards. Meteorology. The scientific study of climate and weather patterns. Natural disaster. Great destruction or loss of life caused by natural forces rather than by human actions. Tropical cyclone. A severe storm with high winds that spiral around a calm center. Depending on where they form, tropical cyclones are called hurricanes, typhoons, or cyclones. Introduction. In the early 2000s, Hurricane Ivan slammed into the Caribbean island of Grenada. It was absolutely terrifying, one resident said. The winds were gusting over 145 miles per hour and just tearing off roofs. Ivan damaged just about every home on the island and destroyed almost half of them, and more than 30 people lost their lives in the storm. One woman, whose roof was torn off, spent the storm huddled under a mattress with her family. "I stared death in the face," she said. "What could be more scary than that?" Hurricanes such as Ivan are an example of extreme weather, a term that refers to severe or unusual weather conditions. In addition to hurricanes, extreme weather includes tornadoes, blizzards, and even severe heat waves or cold spells. Since extreme weather is often destructive, people may try to make preparations for these natural events. However, such preparations are not always possible because extreme weather can be difficult to predict or guard against. When great damage or loss of life occurs, an extreme weather event is called a natural disaster. Hurricanes often produce natural disasters. In this lesson, you will learn about the hurricanes that strike the Caribbean region. You will examine the causes and effects of hurricanes, and you will discover the ways in which people in the region deal with this form of extreme weather. Off to the side here, we have a picture of Hurricane Ivan in the aftermath of Hurricane Ivan. It says it carried this boat from the water and left it stranded on land. So that boat used to be in the water, and now it looks like it's making home inside somebody's home. Fun. The essential question for this lesson is what causes extreme weather and how do people deal with it? This map shows the course of a hurricane from the coast of Africa to the Caribbean Sea. Notice that the storm passes through several locations on its journey. At each location, people must deal with the hurricane as a dangerous form of extreme weather. Keep this map in mind as you try and answer the essential question. So we can see in this map, it started August 25th off the coast of Africa, and it's moving and turning and coming towards the United States. August 28th, it's partway across the Atlantic. September 2nd, we're almost hitting land. September 4th, 2 days later, boom, it's crossing our land. We're hitting Jamaica, we're hitting Cuba. And then on September 7th, it's heading towards Mexico, Texas area. So we're trying to figure out what causes this extreme weather and how do people deal with the extreme weather. The geographic setting. The Caribbean islands stretch in a gentle arc that extends from the tip of Florida to the northern coast of South America. Also known as the West Indies, these islands divide the Atlantic Ocean from the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico. Thousands of islands make up this chain, with many being so tiny that only a few people live on them. However, some islands, such as Cuba and Hispaniola, are large enough to be inhabited by millions of people. The Caribbean islands lie within one of Earth's tropical zones. They have a warm to hot climate year-round, but regular sea breezes cool the islands and make the days pleasant. These islands were first settled by small groups of hunter-gatherers. The word hurricane comes from the language of one of these groups, the Taino, who believed that a storm god called Huracan controlled extreme weather events. During the 1600s, European countries claimed the islands as colonies. The colonists set up plantations, or large farms, where they planted warm weather crops such as tobacco and sugar. The planters tried to make native peoples work on their land, but in a short time, the native peoples died out. Most of them were killed by diseases that were brought by Europeans to the Caribbean. After that, the European colonists brought large numbers of Africans to the Caribbean islands to work on their farms as slaves. During the 1800s, almost all the Caribbean islands gained their independence and slavery was ended. However, independence brought new challenges, including the creation of stable governments and dealing with widespread poverty. Today, many Caribbean islands still base their economies on agriculture. Sugar remains a major cash crop, and bananas, coffee, and spices are also important. In recent years, tourism has also become a key industry on many islands, and tourists flock to the Caribbean to enjoy the region's warm weather, beautiful beaches, and clear blue waters. So this picture over here in the corner is a sun-drenched beach on the island of Trinidad. Tourism is a key industry in the Caribbean. Tourists are attracted to the region by sunny beaches like this one in Trinidad. Tourist areas have sprung up to meet the needs, providing fine hotels, restaurants, and shops. Outside these areas, however, many people still live in poverty. So just because this area right here is super nice looking, it's like a beach that you definitely want to be at right now. Clear blue waters, nice sky, little palm tree thingy that you're sitting underneath. That is all created. It's kind of like a mirage. We're showcasing the best parts of our island. Come visit the best parts of our island. Don't look behind the curtain. Don't pull a Wizard of Oz and look behind the curtain because it's not what it seems. Despite its pleasant climate, the Caribbean does get hit by extreme weather. Severe thunderstorms sometimes strike the islands, and heat waves and dry spells also occur. The most extreme form of weather in the region is the tropical cyclone. In the Caribbean, tropical cyclones are called hurricanes. This is a powerful storm that generates winds of 74 miles per hour or more. From above, the storm looks like a giant pinwheel as it forms over warm water, and it produces heavy rain and high waves as it grows. Our knowledge of tropical cyclones comes from meteorology, which is the scientific study of climate and weather. Meteorologists are scientists who study Earth's atmosphere and climate in an effort to understand weather patterns and the forces that cause them. The size and power of tropical cyclones makes studying these storms especially challenging for meteorologists, who have nevertheless made progress in understanding these severe storms. Through their work, meteorologists are acquiring knowledge that can help to limit the damage and loss of life inflicted by these extreme weather events. Understanding the weather machine. Weather doesn't just happen by itself. Instead, it is a product of natural forces working together like a machine. This weather machine takes energy from the sun, earth, and the atmosphere and transforms it into rain, wind, and other types of weather. Weather affects us every day in large and small ways, and extreme weather such as hurricanes can have extreme effects. Storms with powerful winds can pick things up and drop them miles away. In 1997, toads rained down on the town of Villa Angel Flores in Mexico. A whirlwind had picked up the amphibians from a nearby body of water and then dropped them all over town. When they say toads were raining, they literally meant actual toads were raining. In the sky, toads were falling. Crazy. Weather is caused by interactions among heat, air, and water, with the sun acting as the engine that drives the weather machine. Recall that the sun warms Earth's surface unevenly. Its rays fall most directly between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, whereas higher latitudes receive less direct sunlight. That's why temperatures are generally warmer near the equator and cooler near the poles. The sun's heat is distributed around Earth through a process known as convection, or heat transfer. This transfer of heat occurs in both gases and liquids, such as air and water. Warm air and warm water are less dense than cool air and cool water, and as a consequence, warm air has a tendency to rise in the atmosphere while warm water rises in the oceans. When warm air or water rises out of an area, cool air or water flows in to take its place. The steady movement of air or water due to convection is called a current. Air and water move in predictable patterns. The movement of air and water around the globe occurs in regular patterns. In general, warm air and water currents flow from the equator toward the poles. At the same time, cool air and water currents flow from the poles toward the equator. This predictable weather pattern creates prevailing winds, which are winds that predominantly blow in one direction for most of the year. If Earth didn't rotate, the prevailing winds would move in straight lines between the equator and the poles. Instead, Earth's rotation causes the wind currents to move in a curving pattern that is known as the Coriolis effect. You can examine the curvature of the paths of the prevailing winds on the map in this section. You can also see the names given to prevailing winds depending on their locations. Here we have our map of prevailing winds around the world. Says the map shows the main prevailing winds around the globe. Notice the winds blowing toward the equator from higher latitudes to the north and south. They are known as trade winds, which were named for their ability to move sail-powered ships carrying trade goods across the seas. So our yellow area, we can see our arrows moving in toward the equator line. That yellow areas are trade winds. So they help the ships bring their trade goods. In the pink area in our middle latitudes, we have our westerlies. These are called westerlies because it's the wind's moving from the west toward the east. So it's from the west and going away. And at the very top and bottom in our green and our higher latitudes, we have our polar easterlies. Polar because they're at the poles, obviously, north and south pole, and easterlies because the wind is coming from the east and blowing towards the west. So they're talking about where they come from. Westerlies from west, easterlies from east. Wind and ocean currents have an important influence on weather because they distribute heat and cold throughout the world. Even relatively minor changes in prevailing winds or ocean currents can result in significant changes in the weather. A good example of this effect is the impact of an El Niño, which is a warm ocean current that sometimes flows along the west coast of South America. This warm current does not appear every year, but when it does develop, it usually shows up during the Christmas season. That is why the current is called El Niño, which is a nickname for the Christ child in Spanish. In an El Niño year, the weather on the Pacific coast of North and South America gets warmer, resulting in increased rainfall and frequent flooding. At the same time, the weather on the other side of the Pacific becomes drier. During these dry spells, severe forest fires sometimes occur in Southeast Asia and Australia. These effects of an El Niño's appearance can be felt as far away as India and Africa. Throughout the tropics, the weather machine can be extremely powerful because in these regions there is more energy from the sun to warm the air and water. This solar energy produces tropical cyclones, which are the most violent storms on Earth. Tropical cyclones occur only in areas where ocean temperature reaches at least 80 degrees Fahrenheit. A large amount of warm, moist air is needed to start these storms, which is why tropical cyclones usually occur during the warmer months of the year. Tropical cyclones form in 3 oceans. In the Atlantic Ocean and the Eastern Pacific, these are called hurricanes. In the Western Pacific, they are usually called typhoons. In the Indian Ocean, these storms are called cyclones. Here we've got a little map showing cyclones around the world. The map shows us the areas in blue, or like a light kind of color, are areas where tropical cyclones usually form. And then the arrow and the little spinning S kind of looking thing is the direction that tropical cyclones usually travel. So we can see right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean here, we have our little S. It's a symbol for a hurricane or a cyclone, and it's traveling this way, traveling towards North America. It says the word cyclone comes from a Greek word that means moving in a circle. Tropical cyclones form over 3 oceans at different times of the year. In the Atlantic Ocean and the Eastern Pacific, the seasons run from June through November. In the Western Pacific, the season lasts from April to December. In the Indian Ocean, the season is from December to April. Extreme weather. A hurricane is born. Have you ever witnessed a thunderstorm approaching? The wind picks up and the temperature drops. As clouds roll in and the sky grows dark, a bolt of lightning pierces the sky, followed by a crack of thunder. Suddenly, it's pouring rain. In some regions of the world, such a storm might be the first stage of a hurricane. Hurricanes in the Atlantic Ocean usually start out off the coast of Africa, where water temperatures rise to 80 degrees Fahrenheit or more in the summer. The ocean releases warm, moist air into the atmosphere, and as the warm air rises, the moisture condenses to form clouds and rain. The result is a tropical thunderstorm. Sometimes, several thunderstorms come together to create a tropical disturbance. This is a cluster of thunderstorms that move together with the prevailing winds. As tropical disturbances grow, more warm, more moist air rises from the ocean. In the northern hemisphere, this rising air begins to circle in a counterclockwise direction as a consequence of the Coriolis effect, which you read about earlier. When a wind starts circling inside a tropical disturbance, the storm becomes a tropical depression. When the weather conditions are right, a tropical depression will suck up even more warm air and moisture. When the wind speeds inside the storm reach 39 miles per hour, a tropical depression becomes known as a tropical storm. Most tropical storms die out in time, but a few storms will continue to grow in size and wind speed. When the wind speed reaches 74 miles per hour, the storm becomes a tropical cyclone. A hurricane is born. Inside a monster storm. A hurricane is a massive, whirling storm, and it packs an extremely powerful punch. In just a single day, a hurricane releases more energy than 500,000 atomic bombs. If you could transform that amount of energy into electricity, it would be sufficient to satisfy the electrical needs of the United States for 6 months. A hurricane is made up of 3 key parts. The first part is the eye, which is a calm spot at the center of the storm. The winds of the hurricane swirl around the calm eye, which might be 20 to 40 miles across. The second part of a hurricane is known as the eye wall, which is made up of thunderstorms that surround the eye. The eye wall, which can be anywhere from 5 to 30 miles thick, looks like a huge curtain of clouds when it is viewed from the center of the storm. The third key part of a hurricane consists of rain bands, which are bands of dense clouds that swirl around the eye wall. Spiraling toward the center of the hurricane, the rain bands drop large amounts of rain as the storm travels across the ocean. What you need to know about a hurricane is you're going to hit the rain bands area first, and then get into the eye wall, and then you're going to be in the eye. And if you look up, usually you can see the sky. It's kind of weird looking. You're in the center of the storm. That does not mean the storm is gone. It means you're in the center. There's nothing hitting you right now. But eventually, and rather quickly, you're going to hit the eye wall, and then the rain bands, and then you'll be out of the hurricane. As you read, Atlantic hurricanes are born off the coast of Africa. When a monster storm develops, trade winds blow it from east to west across the Atlantic. The hurricane spins rapidly as it moves, like a giant top. The exact track or path of a hurricane is unpredictable. A hurricane may change course with a shift in wind direction, and it may also speed up, slow down, or even stop for a while and build up strength. As long as a hurricane stays over warm water, it can continue to generate both greater size and power. Severe storms can swell up to 1,000 miles in size, while registering wind speeds of up to 200 miles per hour. So going along, so long as the hurricane or something is on warm water, it can continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like its superpower, but it's a villain. Supervillain power. As soon as the hurricane steps out of the water, as soon as it leaves the warm water, is when it starts falling apart. That's why we don't typically see hurricanes here in Michigan, because we don't have that water to control it. As soon as it hits land in Florida or Texas, it's going to start fading away. It's going to cause a lot of destruction on its way to fade away, but it's going to start fading away. Alright, so we know that a hurricane develops in 4 main stages. This is what they look like. So first up, various storms come together and they form a tropical disturbance. So we can see developing thunderclouds, rain, warm air, moist air. All this is coming together and starting to band together. Next, the disturbance grows into a tropical depression. So now it's all kind of getting smushed together and the wind is starting to spin around it. The storm is beginning to circle. So instead of just going in a straight line, now we're spinning a little bit. And the warm air and water is kind of being sucked into this spin. After the tropical depression, it becomes a tropical storm. So now the winds are getting larger. It's more than 39 miles per hour, but it's not quite at 74 yet. It's somewhere in between. But it's getting bigger and bigger, and we're spinning more and more and more. Finally, the storm becomes a tropical cyclone or hurricane. In each stage, wind speeds increase as the storm sucks in more air and moisture. So now that we have our cyclone, we've got our winds that are more than 74 miles per hour. We've got the center, we have our eye, we have the wall surrounding the eye, and we have the rain bands that are surrounding the whole thing itself. So today we learned, well, how hurricanes are created. On Wednesday, we're going to be talking about how we can track and prepare for a hurricane and what happens after a hurricane hits. I will see you on Wednesday. Goodbye.